Welcome to the Hello Flow podcast, a space where we bridge together professional success and career alignment with personal well-being. I'm your host, Casey Cunliffe. Join me in conversations around driving your career while also being mindful of your overall well-being. At a time when many people are awakening to their soul's purpose and navigating that messy but magical middle, I offer this space for personal and professional growth and alignment, and a place to ground and support you in your daily grind. After tuning into this podcast, I hope you receive the empowering counsel and actionable tools to usher in more ease and flow in your life, and equip you as you discover, develop, and evolve your Dharma. Now on to the episode. This week's special guest is Chelsea Tsuchida, a professional organizer and Feng Shui Consultant, or your Feng Shui Bae, as she likes to say. In 2020, Chelsea started Revise+Refine to inspire and help people to declutter and get organized. Since then, her services expanded to also include Feng Shui design. I'm so excited to share this really fun conversation where we not only talk about what Chelsea does as a professional organizer, but more importantly, what's underneath those desires to want to declutter and organize your space, how your physical space is a reflection of your inner being, and how can we clear out any stagnant energy that our home may hold. So if you're tuning in and wanting home organization tips, you are in for a treat because we go much deeper than that. Excited for you to join in on the conversation. Now on to the episode. I'm so excited to have this week's guest. Welcome to the Hello Flow pod, Chelsea.
Thanks, Casey. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this topic because when I first met you on Island and heard that you are a professional organizer and that you are studying Feng Shui, I was so excited to learn more about it because I've read the Marie Kondo book, and myself, my personal, organizing kind of philosophy is very aligned with the kind of work that you do. So excited to hear about your story and what you do. So let's start off with what you do now, and what drove you to kind of do what you do today.
I love hearing that you've read Marie Kondo's book, and that's maybe a commonality, a similarity that we have, because that is actually how my sort of entrepreneurial journey began. So like you mentioned, I'm currently a professional organizer and a Feng Shui consultant for my business, Revise+Refine. And what started this journey was back in 2019 when I was actually at the height, or I would say like really at a high point in my previous career, which was in media and marketing. And I was on track to make six figures that year. I was going to New York about 2 times a year to meet with luxury brand clients, luxury brand advertising clients, basically my dream roster of clients that I had wanted since I knew I wanted to go into media. So there were a lot of elements of my life that from the outside looking in was, very maybe fun, glamorous. Definitely, I think part of me was trying to like embody this Devil Wears Prada, Carrie Bradshaw type of vibe. But at the same time, I was feeling very burnt out. I had been in the media and marketing industry for, I think at that point, about 8 years at that point. And so while things may have looked really great from the outside, I think on a personal level, I was really struggling with this feeling of burnout. And looking back, I can attribute it to a lot of things around boundaries and kind of investing the same amount of time in myself that I was investing in my career and in other people. But all that to say, there were a lot of things that were happening at the time that was making me feel like I didn't really have a good control or a good hold on my life and where my career was maybe taking me. I started reading Marie Kondo's book, and I think there was a part of me that thought if I'm feeling out of control in other areas of my life, one thing I can control is my home and my belongings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where I think where it started. I've always been, I would say, pretty organized, neat, tidy. I can attribute a lot of that, I think, to the way my mom raised me and just kind of right the habits and the routines I was taught growing up to always put your toys away and that you were, responsible for caring for these items. If not, they would go in the trash or get donated and given to somebody who would care for them better than you.
Mm.
But yeah, so I don't think I ever felt like I wasn't organized, but I think I was just so overwhelmed. And I thought that by looking at my belongings and maybe downsizing that a little bit, reducing the clutter, it would just feel a little, I would maybe gain a little bit of clarity. So I think that was like my goal going into it. I don't think I ever had the idea of like living a minimalist lifestyle or anything like that. But all that to say, that was in 2019. I think between having a full-time job, managing personal things, and doing this decluttering project, this of doing KonMari in my home, it took about, I'd say, 8 months to a year. And of course, that was around the beginning of 2020 by the time I kind of completed that project. And then the pandemic happened. So I had been posting a lot about my decluttering and my organizing on my personal social media, had gotten a lot of really positive feedback, and originally started Revise and Refine account as more of a content page on Instagram. I don't think I really intended for it to be a business. But when we all started staying home and your home became not just the place where you come to after work, but it was where we were working from home, distance learning, right? Kids were staying home and distance learning. So I kind of thought like, okay, maybe I could help people better organize their space so that it can support them in this kind of like unknown season that we're all in, right? Of having
Mm-hmm.
to use our home as now this like multitude of things. So I started just helping people virtually plan their space, figure out maybe if there were any storage products or organizational products that would help them. And from there, it's just kind of evolved. So yeah, started Revise and Refine in 2020, and now in 2023, added Feng Shui, like you said, into the
Mm-hmm.
mix. And so that's where we are now.
Thanks for sharing your story. I love how the entry point was, it wasn't just about, here's my physical space, I'm trying to organize it. It was an internal kind of motivation and drive. And I love that philosophy of how, in order to kind of have some calm internally, let me add some calm and organization externally as well. As did I kind of read that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Gretchen Rubin has a book called Outer Order, Inner Calm, which I
Mm.
think speaks to this perfectly as well. Um, and it was really interesting because I think now looking back, I can more clearly identify and see that internal motivation that you talk about. I think at the time it was much more surface level. My understanding of it, I think, was much
Mhm.
more surface level, right? I just wanted a really clean, beautiful home, right? Um, but by looking at my belongings and like each individual item that was in my space, it really led me, I think really that not only led to my path in an entrepreneurial sense, I think it also started my kind of self discovery journey or remembering journey, like whatever we want to call it, right? It was the beginning of my coming home and returning to myself and really
Mhm.
looking at how my belongings were reflecting the values I was holding.
Yeah.
And it was it was interesting to kind of recognize through that process that some of the things that I was putting a lot of value into, that I was maybe
Mm.
investing financially and buying, right, was not actually fulfilling me in an internal sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gap is what leads to this sense of overwhelm or lack, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
not having enough. A really, I think, easy example is I had, so much clothes that I had just accumulated over the years. And yet I remember so often thinking I have nothing to wear,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I was subscribing to Rent the Runway
Mm.
because I didn't want to wear the same outfit to an event and, maybe be seen in that outfit more than once. So there was a lot of pressure that I think I was putting on myself based on the expectations I thought that other people had of me. And realizing by looking at my belongings that, like, wow, you have more than enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe it's just that it's not just the amount, it's like the quality. And again, does it feel aligned? Like a lot of the things I owned, clothing wise, if we're, staying on this topic, were things that were, given to me. I'm really lucky. I'm pretty much the same size as my mom. We can wear the same clothes. But it wasn't my style, right? It wasn't something I would choose if I went to a store. It wasn't a brand maybe that I really wanted to support. I love shopping local when possible. And so, all of those things. And I realized those values weren't reflected in the things I actually owned. And that's why there was this kind of gap of feeling like I still needed more. I still needed to acquire more.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the case. It was like I just wasn't acquiring, or I wasn't looking at the right things,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wasn't keeping the right things in my home. I was just filling it with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you were describing that, I was trying to think and remember in the Marie Kondo book, she talks about, when you're going through the different spaces in your home, you take a look at each item and then you ask yourself, does this spark joy or something like that? And then I think the second criteria was, have you used it like in the last year or two? So I'm trying to cross that with the way you're looking at in terms of how this aligns to your values. So, can you talk a little bit about your approach and how maybe there's commonalities with Marie Kondo, since a lot of people understand like that organizing, and then what you do differently?
Yeah. So I love the concept of asking yourself, does this spark joy? The thing that I've noticed, though, in the past 3 years of working with my clients up to this point one-on-one, is that I think many of us have kind of lost or forgotten what joy feels like to us. I think sometimes because, and now social media, right?
Yeah.
There's another layer of that. There's a lot of, I think, external influence on us of what should spark joy, right? A Louis Vuitton bag or a luxury brand bag, right? Or an expensive gadget, right? Because there's monetary value associated with it. And so I think the problem sometimes of asking yourself, does this spark joy, is you kind of got to dig first and understand what joy feels like, true joy feels like to you. And I think that exercise is much harder, right? It's I think it takes practice. I think it's like a muscle. The more you can identify these kind of joy moments in your day-to-day life, the easier it'll be for you to then identify if an item is invoking a similar feeling for you. The first part of my process, which I call the R&R method, is to reflect, to ask yourself these questions of like, what brings me joy, right? Is it spending time with your kids? Is it laying on the beach? If it's not experiential, is it like an item? Maybe you have like a childhood stuffed animal or a picture of your spouse, right? Like I think it's finding the items that like it unequivocally feel joyous to you and kind of create a baseline with those items of what joy feels like, right? And use that anytime you're, maybe looking at an item, deciding whether to keep it or let it go, and almost compare it to that feeling with the the item that's kind of like your joy baseline,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's one way you can kind of tap into what really fills you, right? What really feels fulfilling to you versus maybe what society says should.
Yeah.
And you asked about the difference between the way I work with my clients versus maybe something more widely known like the KonMari method. And again, KonMari method is what I followed when I first decluttered and organized my space. The biggest challenge I had with that specific approach was, and if you're not familiar, is that you're looking at categories of items at once. It's gathering every piece of clothing from every space in your house. It's looking at every book. So if you have a bookshelf in your room and a bookshelf in your living room, you're bringing all of these items and categories, all of these items within a category together to look at them as a whole, which I think is very effective. However, I think it's also can be very overwhelming for some who maybe feel or believe they don't have the time to do that. And again, that's a story, and that's something I can work through with my clients. But I created my method to be applicable to any space in a home or an office or a storage facility without this kind of added pressure of like, do I have every item within this category? So my R&R method is 4 steps. Like I mentioned, the first is reflect. It's really tapping into your why, understanding what fills you with joy. Why is decluttering and getting organized important to you? Because it's not always a fun or a comfortable task or project. And so when it gets tedious or hard or uncomfortable, you're going to need to tap back into that why of why you're doing it in the first place. The second step is review, which is basically the step of pulling everything out from its home in a specific space. So you can do it in one drawer, one cabinet. It doesn't have to be an entire room. But the idea is you take everything out and go through every item one by one. Now, the goal of the review is not to purge or let things go necessarily. The goal or the purpose of the review is for you to just get a really clear inventory of what you have. And from there, you can make your decisions on whether you want to keep something or let it go, right? I think when we put that pressure of us, that expectation of, I'm doing this because I have to get rid of things, it can be, I think, like a mental and emotional block, right? Like it creates just this added pressure that you kind of don't need in this already pretty tedious process. So second step is review. Third step is revise. This is where we cross over from decluttering to organizing. Revise is the step where we're going to think about your routines, your habits, your day-to-day lifestyle, and also your goals, right? Like what are your aspirations? And kind of rejigging, right, your space, your external environment to be more supportive of you in all of these areas, in your habits, in your goals. For some people, they just want to feel more supported in the habits and the routines they already have. And others, it's because maybe they have a goal of getting more in shape. And if that's the case, then we need to maybe put your workout gear and your workout clothes more front and center, right? It's those simple kind of revisions and tweaks so that your external environment reflects your internal goals or your lifestyle. And then the final step is refine, which I think for most of my clients is probably the funnest part. It's where we bring in kind of those final touches, the products, right? The labels, the things that's going to make it really fun for you to maintain and exist within your home. So that's the 4-step process of the R&R method: reflect, review, revise, and refine.
And I think that was so one is very like organized and process oriented, and I love that kind of structure that you added. And now I know where revise and refine come from as well. A couple things stood up to me. One, when you mentioned the revise portion, and you talked about how can we align this to your personal goals? It reminded me of something I just read. I'm currently reading Atomic Habits, and one of the chapters talks about environment and what you're kind of putting in your environment. And if you're looking to change a habit into a good habit, how do you put those like front and center? So your method includes sort of that kind of notion of what are you putting front and center in your environment that supports the goals that you have. So I think that's really neat. And the second piece I wanted to ask is, or wanted to point out, is you mentioned crossing over from decluttering to organizing. Because when we think of, oh, let's organize my space, we don't say declutter, but I feel like that term declutter is huge in the process before you can even get to the organizing part. And the reason why I think that is, it kind of goes back to your initial story about, this is an intrinsic motivation for me to organize my external space. And in doing so, when I declutter and clear out my space externally, it'll help me clear up kind of the clutter in my head and mentally. So can you kind of talk a little bit about the difference between decluttering and organizing, like the, very surface level, but then also how it impacts us beyond just our physical space?
I think a lot of times when people say, I want to get organized, or maybe they say like my house is messy and I feel disorganized, it really is more often, I would say, about the decluttering. That's actually what people are asking help for or help with. And I think a large part of that is because decluttering requires a lot more emotional and mental energy from you than organizing, in the sense that you're being asked in the decluttering process to make constant decisions about items in your home, belongings, right? Things that can have a lot of sentimental value, not always, right? And this is why for some people it's way easier for them to go through their clothing than it is to go through a photo album. Or somebody who cooks might have a harder time decluttering their kitchen than decluttering maybe their closet, because maybe clothes are not as intrinsically valuable to them. Because decluttering asks you to make these decisions over and over again, it can be emotionally taxing, which is why I think it's important that we break up that process into kind of smaller amounts of time, smaller bite-sized pieces, so that you're not reaching this point of like overwhelm and stress. Because if you're feeling these, I don't want to say negative emotions, because I think if you are starting to feel overwhelmed and stressed in the decluttering process, that could be a really good sign for you to, one, take a pause, but also when you are ready to go back to those items, there might be something about them that is trying to tell you something about yourself. But you don't want to hit the point where you're kind of resenting the process, because then you're never going to want to do it again. And the thing about decluttering specifically is that it's not a one and done project. I think in order to live like I don't want to say a minimalist lifestyle, but a really clear, like, to kind of maintain the level of organization that you want, oftentimes you're going to make those kind of decluttering type decisions of whether to keep or let something go. That's a daily practice. That's a daily routine that you have to learn how to do, right? That's why mail piles up so quickly, because nobody wants to go through all of their mail. And then you end up with this massive pile that just feels overwhelming. Whereas if you go through your mail every day, it takes you maybe 5 or 10 minutes, right? At most. Just decide, what do you need to keep? What do you need to take action on? And what do you need to, can you just throw away or shred, right? The junk mail. But different from, so that's, decluttering. Again, a lot of emotional energy and investment from you. Organizing, on the other hand, it is asking you to be, I think, more logical, more operational, right? Systematic in your approach, because organizing, again, is creating those systems of, where things go, how to store items, how to set up your space so that it feels supportive to you. And that's less, there's really not a ton of emotion invested there. You kind of just have to know your own routine, know your habits, know your tendencies. But it's not asking you, like decluttering is, to make those emotional decisions. So that's why I think organizing probably comes a little easier to most people than decluttering, if you had to just compare the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like like you said, it's like the fun part of
Yeah.
it. Once you've cleared the space, once you've cleared the clutter, these are the items that are aligned to my values.
Yeah.
These are the items that I use. And so now I get to organize and display them in a certain way.
Enjoy them. You get to
Yeah.
like enjoy them.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And so when we start off with the decluttering, what do you find what gets people stuck, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're working with someone and if they're stuck on really any stage, but I'm assuming they're going to get stuck kind of in the decluttering stage. Where do you think that comes from?
Oftentimes, where people get stuck or where progress starts to slow is when you're faced with an item that you're feeling some sort of resistance to in terms of making a decision on whether it's valuable or worth it to you, again, aligning with your personal values to keep or let it go. And where people get stuck is this, they feel this resistance because maybe their gut is telling them, I don't want this, I don't need this in my home. Or logically, see, it's really interesting because what I notice happens with some of my clients is that, people will say things like, oh, I never use this, but I might need it one day.
So, as you were talking, I was kind of going in my head and thinking, okay, what are some items I have that I'm holding on to and why? And so, two things sort of came up. One, I think not just for myself, but others, is like your identity. And if you like identify with certain
Totally.
like objects that maybe like in your life you're trying to move on from,
Yeah.
but you're not letting go. And so for me, it's like all of my corporate clothing.
Yes.
My suits.
I totally resonate. I totally resonate.
Yeah, my suits, my
that
pumps,
business,
my dresses. Yeah.
business casual.
Yes, the business gear.
Yep.
And I have kept all of them. They're hanging in my closet. There's some in storage. And I haven't been in that space for 2.5 years. And for some reason, I'm still holding on to all that clothing. So identity was one. And then the other one that popped in my head, I don't know if this applies directly to me, but I'm thinking for others when I kind of talk to other people. And then especially as we kind of hear like our parents or older generations when they're like hoarding stuff. And, being a child of immigrants and, they came from a pretty poor country and not having a lot growing up. I'm thinking people hold on to stuff because they, never really had this kind of stuff before. So even though they don't need it, and maybe they don't even identify with it anymore, but it's like, I'm lucky to have had the item.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of categorize that? If someone has, I don't know if it's a sentimental thing, but does that come up at all with clients?
Oh, definitely. I think you hit it right on. The identity piece is huge. I think I have that in common with you. Actually, I think in the last 6 months, I've really kind of come to terms with the fact that I really no longer want, I guess, or identify with the person I was when I was in marketing and media. I'm very grateful for those lessons and that experience, and I loved the people and the industry, and I still have, I still have a lot of love for media. That's why I love doing things like
Mhm.
this. Um, but that's no longer the way I see myself, right? And I think that when someone is sort of grappling with this, right, whether it's somebody they feel like they used to be or they were in the past, or it's somebody that they want to be in the future,
Mhm.
right? I think you really have to consider how that's serving you, right?
Mhm.
Is it holding you back? Is it just a sentimental item that when you look at it, you do have these kind of positive memories, or maybe they're not as positive, but maybe it's a good reminder of a lesson, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think you have to kind of dig into your intention behind why you're keeping the item. Um, and that's gonna look a little different, right, for everyone. And I also think it comes with time. Like, I don't believe that you can really force like this process of letting go, right, of things.
Mhm.
Whether they're beliefs, whether they're identities, whether they're physical belongings. I think there's like a time and a place. So if someone's feeling a lot of resistance to letting something go, even though maybe logically they know they don't need or want the item anymore, sometimes it's just not the right time, right? They need
Mhm.
to maybe work through something or heal that part of themselves, or whatever it may be, before they can let go of that external representation, right, of this belief or identity.
Yeah.
I think just like us, just like everything, our physical belongings have energy, and it's not meant to stagnate, right? Like, things are
Mhm.
meant to flow. And I think when you're holding on to an item that isn't serving you, and you're also not using it or utilizing it in the way that it's intended, the way that it's meant to be, it is also not fulfilling its purpose, right? And so it's it creates this sort of like stagnation of energy, I think, in your home too.
Yeah.
This idea that like things aren't leaving, it's just more things are coming in. And I think that affects the overall energy of your space.
I love
Yeah.
that perspective and that way of thinking of things in your home. It's taking up, if it's not serving you, it's taking up space, it's taking up energy, and that's creating a stagnation of energy that doesn't allow for the right energy or the aligned type of energy, the
Yeah.
aligned items that you can actually replace it with, or just to keep that space open so you can receive.
Yeah.
So I love
Yeah.
that way of that sort of, kind of, I don't know if this is a good segue and we don't spend a lot of time on it because I know, with time on the podcast, but how does that relate to Feng Shui?
For me, it felt like such a natural progression to learn more about feng shui and to study it, to understand more of the energetics behind environment and space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with decluttering and organizing, it can feel very tangible, right? Actionable, process driven, pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
And what I love about feng shui is that it's asking you to consider the things in your space that you can't see, but that maybe on some level you're still feeling or experiencing, even if you're not aware of it or conscious of it. So, feng shui literally translates to wind water. And the idea is that we look at, as feng shui practitioners, we look at the qi of your space or the energy,
Mm-hmm.
and see how we can really optimize it, right? To support you in your specific season of life and your specific goals. Um, and what I love about it too is it's really similar in a way to my approach of decluttering and organizing, in that it's not a one time adjustment. It's not a one and done sort of thing, because your needs are going to change over the course of your life. Your goals are going to change, right? And so your space that served you as a 16-year-old, right,
Yeah.
is not going to serve you as a 35-year-old. And so, and that seems, again, like kind of a silly notion, right? That you would, that would be the case, but we hold on to so many of the things that are from our past, right? So I like to say that in my business, what I hope for my clients is that we look at ways to honor your past, celebrate your present, and create more space for your future. Because again, I think it is about this balance of these elements, right? You don't want to be too focused on the future. One, it hasn't happened yet. Prevents you from being present in your current circumstance. And I'm a planner, I love to plan. So I also recognize the value of, you can't always just live in the present and not kind of have a goal or a North Star or a compass for, where you want to move forward to. I think of, you know, I know you're a Dharma coach, and something that I think you've shared in one of your solo episodes was this idea of there are many different paths to get to, or to live out, right, your Dharma. And I think that that's similar to my way of looking at decluttering, organizing, and feng shui, and working with the energetics of your space, in that there is no one right way. There's so many options, right, and ways, and there's they can all work, right? But it's all about making those adjustments and those tweaks over time so that it makes sense for you in that season. And maybe when that season of yours, that season, specific season is done, then you make another change, right? And you're still living in alignment with who you are.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you as a person it doesn't mean you've outgrown your space. It just means that you need to make your space work a little differently for where you are in that point of your life.
I love how you just tied that together with Dharma, and the way that, I view it too is it's a process. It's a journey. It's not a one and done. It's you are tweaking and revising throughout the different chapters and seasons of your life, whether it's your space, whether it's how you express your Dharma. So I love that connection you just made.
Yeah. Like, we love a home makeover show, right?
Yes.
We love an overnight transformation.
Yeah.
We love a before and after photo in your 10-second reel. But the reality of it is the really meaningful changes, right, happen over time.
Yes.
And with these sometimes like small changes, small realizations, letting just that one more thing go, right?
Yeah.
To constantly remind yourself, come home to yourself.
I just thought of another connection to the Atomic Habits book because I've been reading it.
Okay, which I feel like, as somebody who loves, like, I love to talk about habits. I love like personality frameworks, like, your Enneagram, your disc profile, your human design, your astrological signs, your 9-star key. Like, I'm into that. And I will say, like, I don't know if it's embarrassing that I have not read Atomic Habits.
Well, it's my first time reading it, and I'm having Sammy come on. We're doing like a mini book review of it, but it's like fresh in my head, and it's amazing book. But it's funny how a lot of the things, not funny, but it's great to hear that a lot of like your tactics in your approach is tied back to Atomic Habits. And one of the things that he talks about, the author, I think his name is James Clear, is everyday 1% improvement. Just the small changes 1% lead to long-term sustaining change. And that's sort of what we're talking about here is you can do the big splashy, let me just, do a home makeover. But if it doesn't go beyond that, and if it doesn't go deeper to understand why you're doing that and to clear it out, then it may not be as long-term. It may not be as sustaining. And so if you work on things slowly and it's a process, then that's like lasting change.
Yeah.
That can be in Dharma, that could be in your habits, that could be in changing your life, and that can be in your space. They're all connected. That's why I think it's really beautiful. Yeah, I love like all of these connections because, when we initially are talking about this, I think we can go into it thinking it's very surface level. Oh, yeah, we're going to, clear our space and we're going to organize it. But it's really what's that why behind it? What's driving that person? And from an Ayurvedic perspective, well, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but of the 3 doshas, most people are imbalanced in what we call Vata dosha. And Vata is about like a lot of movement, a lot of air. And so if you're imbalanced there, you feel a little cluttered. You feel spacey.
Oh, interesting.
Very hard to focus, scatterbrained. And so if you're imbalanced, which most people will be, especially if you travel a lot, if you're, overworking, if you're doing a lot of things, then one of the tools to rebalance is to have a neat and tidy space. And it kind of goes back to your initial drive of, there's things I can't control, but I'm going to go within, and that's impacting me internally. So I'm going to kind of clear my space because I can control that. Because that is something I can clear. And then it comes back to how you feel internally. It'll help calm you. So we did a whole 360
Totally.
in the conversation.
That's so funny.
Landing there. I know that you mentioned you work with your in-person clients here on Oahu, but where can people find you outside of Oahu? Where can they connect with you? How can they work with you, even if it's not in person, or learn from you?
I actually recently retired my original offer as a business, as Revise and Refine, which was my virtual DIY with direction service. And the reason that I retired it was to create space for a new offering, which is my R&R membership. And I created the membership because after working with clients one-on-one for 3 years, which I still love to do. I'm a projector. I'm a 3/5 projector. And so I really thrive in kind of this more intimate setting of getting to really work with people, right? And get to know them. And so but I also have seen that through some, online challenges of just challenging my like online communities, social media followers to declutter in short 15-minute tasks a day. Just doing these kind of like short sprints of challenges was really motivating for people. They also, I think people love this idea that other people are in it with them, right? Whether we want to call that misery loves company or, community, having community. But yeah, I've seen, and it really energized me, is what I noticed, was being able to connect with people still in a rather small, intimate setting, like often through DMs or emails, but this also sharing of resources, right? Like I'll have people tell me about donation drives or like, pop-up, like pop-up donation drives and things like that around the island or maybe in their specific neighborhood and community. And it's great, I think, to be able to share those resources because at the end of the day, I'm just one person, right? I'm not going to know everything. And so I wanted to create something that had more of this community aspect to it, this sharing of resources. Use that format, but help people and still guide them in the process of decluttering and organizing in a way that they can do on their own. They don't have to hire me in the maybe more traditional sense of having me come into their home and work with them in person. So the R&R membership, it is really a year-long membership. Like I said, when I first decluttered and organized my home, it took about a year. And it's because I didn't have 8 hours a day to just work on this one project, right? You have to balance it between work, a lot of my audience are moms, have families. They're also really high achieving, ambitious professionals. Many of them are entrepreneurs and business owners. And I recognize that decluttering, organizing, while it may not be your number one priority, as it shouldn't be, it's something that they recognize could be really valuable to them in, again, supporting them in other areas of their life, right? So I wanted to create a membership or an offer that would encourage you to cultivate these habits, right, over a longer period of time with some direction and support from myself, as well as bring in guest speakers who are experts in their niche and can help you better understand yourself and how to foster better habits. So, for example, in the membership, we're going to have Fozia Morgan as a guest speaker 1 month. She's a human design coach like yourself, or human design reader like yourself. And then also Taryn Dickey, who I met through a mutual friend. She's not here on island, but she is an ADHD coach. So she specializes in working with individuals who, have either been diagnosed or self-diagnosed as ADHD. And and we'll have others as well. So it's getting that guidance, that insight from myself, from other experts. Is the community aspect of being able to share resources, get to know the other members, right? And see and like know that other people are trying to learn and grow in this way just like you are. And I kept some elements of my DIY with direction offer, which that my clients have found the most valuable, which is the product recommendations, right? So that they don't have to scroll Amazon or online to find the right products for their space. So within the membership, you'll be able to post pictures of your space, share measurements with me, and I'll recommend products to you based on getting to know you, getting to know your space, and getting to know your routines. So yeah, I'm really excited for this kind of new way to show up in a way that I think really I'm just excited because as like a 3-5 projector, I just want to teach and share what I've learned. And it's, how you were saying a lot of the things I was talking about, you see similarities or parallels in like a very famous book like Atomic Habits. But what's so interesting is like I learned it from just living it, which I think
Three
is
line.
my yeah. So I love to read too, but it's like putting it into practice is what I think really helps you to integrate it, right? And that's what I hope to provide to people through this membership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how you're incorporating other systems, modalities, so that the members can understand themselves in different ways, and that can inform them in their own decluttering and organizing. Thanks for sharing that. It sounds like an amazing opportunity, whether you're on island here on Oahu or off island, anywhere in the world, to have your guidance and some of the guest speakers in there too. So where can people connect with you online, socials, website, where they can learn more about you and your offerings?
Yes, so you can learn more about the R&R membership on my website, reviseandrefine.com/membership. You can connect with me on social media at Revise and Refine. I'm on Instagram. I will have a Facebook community, but it will be private to the R&R members. So so if you want to connect with me, again, Instagram at Revise and Refine. I'm on Threads at Revise and Refine, or my website, reviseandrefine.com.
Thanks for being a guest, Chelsea.
Thanks, Casey. It was a great conversation.
This conversation showed us how the professional organizing and feng shui process is more than just about decluttering and organizing your space. The process is tied to your inner world, your identity, what you may still be holding on to that may no longer serve you. Clearing your physical space helps to clear your inner world and your mental space. If you're feeling overwhelmed, scatterbrained, or anxious about what's going on around you that's outside of your control, clearing, decluttering, and organizing your physical space can help calm the inner nerves and clear out the added or stagnant energy within you as well. And I love the parts where we weaved in the similarities with our Dharma journey and how there is no one right way to approach this process. You decide what season of life you are in, clear out what no longer serves you, create the environment and space, and then tweak and refine along the way until your next season. And even the comparisons with worldwide best-selling book Atomic Habits, where you prime your space for who you are, what you value, and what you are working towards. If you are, for example, someone who prioritizes working out and going to the gym, or you're striving to prioritize it, your gym clothing and shoes are front and center in your space. Your physical space is a tool to help you establish and master your habits so that you reinforce the person you are today and the person you are striving to become. And I think that's a great way to round out the episode, as we'll be continuing the talk about creating and sustaining good habits next week through a mini review of the book Atomic Habits, which we mentioned several times in this discussion. So hope you join me and another special guest next week as we talk all things books and being a book nerd. Once again, this is Casey Canlas, host of the Hello Flow podcast, signing off until next time. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If there's anything that resonated with you, please share it on Instagram and tag me at CaseyCan_ and at HelloFlow Collective. I would love to hear from you. As always, if you enjoy listening to what we discuss on the podcast, please share the show with friends who may also resonate. And don't forget to also subscribe, rate, and review. See you next time on the Hello Flow podcast.